Good afternoon, everyone, to the 8th talk of the Digital Food 2021 series. So today is actually the 100th day since the launching of our first talk, when we started to discuss how will digital transformation change the agro-food world. So congratulations, everybody, for participating, contributing, and in the presentations and discussions. In the last 8 talks, 6, 7, today is the 8th, we had great stories from speakers, and we had connected people from actually all around the world. I counted our registrants with more than 20 countries, from China, Nepal, Zimbabwe, Spain, Brazil, but of course also Europe. A big part of our audience are from the Netherlands and Germany and Belgium. So today our topic is about storytelling and how to capture the commercial opportunities by creating transparency. So let's start first with the poll to our participant today. Bianca, please pull up the first poll question. The first question is, how often do you base your purchase decisions on stories? So while you are thinking about that question, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Tiffany Tsui. I'm the co-organizer and moderator of Digital Foods 2021 series. I'm Chinese and I'm Dutch. I'm living in the Netherlands. I focus on sustainability, technology, and transformation, and bridging East with West. Together with Stef Heutink, the founder of Foodlog, we developed the concept of the Digital Food 2021 series to focus on the theme of to connect data, strategy, and technology, and to connect people, ideas, and regions. First of all, I would like to thank you for the sponsors, ktba, InfoSupport, SyncForce, City of Rotterdam, Province Zuid-Holland, Greenport West-Holland, Leiden, Delft, Erasmus University, and Wageningen University. Before I introduce, we have 2 speakers today in our panel. Before I introduce the first speaker, Wilbert Hilkens, let's first show the poll result, Bianca. Okay, so we have right in the alley of, so a lot of, most of our audience today would base on purchase decisions based on stories. That's great. So Wilbert is the managing director of FoodInsights. He's an experienced industry expert in the fresh produce value chains. You come with a broad background from technology, finance, supply chain management, and strategy. So I would like to tell us, why do you think that, or how do we make transparency a worldwide standard for all the food companies by 2030?
I will start to unmute myself. Thank you for giving me the floor and share with the people of Digital Food the work we do and our thoughts as well. First, my name is Wilbert Hilkens. I'm founder and managing director of FoodInsights. FoodInsights helps food companies with supply chain solutions. I will elaborate a little bit more on that one later. We're located in Den Bosch, the Netherlands, and we work at the moment in Northwestern Europe for various brands and food companies. And our supply chain solutions, they are focused on actually two directions. One, I will talk about that one a little bit later, is on creating additional value for the produce that we're talking about. And second is by reducing the risk in supply chains and optimizing the supply chains. So reducing costs in the end by keeping the service level at the same level or increase it even. Yeah, today we're going to talk about data-driven storytelling. That's our approach. So how can you tell the story of the goods on a batch level or in an automated way? We normally use an additional communication channel for that. And the key question here is why would we do it? Why create additional transparency to do the data-driven storytelling? And that is to bridge the attitude-behavior gap that you see. You see that in the consumer end, a big part of the consumers intends to buy eco-friendly goods, goods that are can relate to animal welfare, to regionality, etc., etc. But somehow they feel a block when they're in the shopping floor to actually really show the behavior and turn it into purchases. Consumers dislike a lack of transparency, and that's also the key to consumer trust. As a brand, you want to create the trust just to create additional value, but also to feed the repurchasing behavior, of course. Previous research showed that about 3/4 of all shoppers would be willing to switch to another brand when that provides more information. So getting more in-depth information is important here. About half of the shoppers say they follow a diet or a health program. And that's interesting because they will check all the time at the goods they're buying, what is in it, and also they would like to know more background information, and not just one single time, but they will keep on doing that, and they should be supported in this behavior. And about 4/5 of all shoppers are more likely to be loyal to a brand that provides more in-depth information beyond the physical label. So they have the opportunity to dive deeper into the background information of the product they're buying. And it might be that that can be a product or a product group they're purchasing time again, and then they will check it in certain moments and like to know more about the background, and other times they will not actively check it, but it will stay in the back of their minds. So that means that the background information of the products is important if you look to the consumer behavior. But then it is important, okay, which specific items are important in Europe. And now I should move to the new slide. And based on research of McKinsey lately, last few weeks ago, you see three big moves over the past year in the COVID-19 era. You see that consumers tend to focus more on online shoppings. They focus more on value, but if you look to the lifestyle consumption drivers, 2021 compared to pre COVID-19. You see the next changes in the behavior based on a questionnaire with the question, I plan to change my behavior. You see the results for various countries from France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Poland, Russia, Spain, Sweden, United Kingdom, and a European average. That you see that there is a shift of the attitude of European consumers towards more trusted products, with transparency as the fuel of consumer trust. And there you see that health is the key consumption driver, which is more than before the COVID-19 time. And a second is the need to source regionally or locally, and especially in the more southern countries, added with Germany. But health is key, and information about health is then very important. Especially millennial moms are important in that change. They are comfortable with technology. They put a high value on transparency, of course. And if we look at the goods that are most interested for this type of technology, they will see dairy, fresh produce, meat, and chocolate and coffee as the product groups that are interesting. Now, what do is to lift storytelling to the next level. There are three important points that you want to look at. One is to provide an experience behind the label of the product, and do the data-driven storytelling. It should be a part of the customer experience, the customer journey that they have. And what you deliver is focusing on trust, and that's especially the origin insights, the direct advantage that people have and experience, and that is about the ingredient and the claim information. So that is their direct advantage. And third is, and that is most important for the brand or the food company itself, is to create inspiration and provide for repurchasing. I want to show you in one of our cases, and it's an animation of about 2 minutes.
Meet Jan and Joris Koopers. They're the owners of Koopers Poultry, a family-owned poultry integration, producing products for consumers up till parent stock in the Netherlands, with their retail brand, the Kluke Kip. Consumers in the Netherlands are conscious with regard to product quality, ecology and animal welfare, as long as this doesn't affect affordability. That works well because Koopers Poultry has among the healthiest broilers in Europe, a low carbon footprint due to energy-neutral broiler farming, and additional zero emission through air washing. Their most important retail client asked them to boost their poultry sales by creating more consumer trust, by providing supply chain transparency towards consumers and explaining the quality and sustainability efforts. To make it extra challenging, price pressure in Northwest Europe has triggered a strong need to control costs on all levels in the supply chain. What should Jan and Joris Koopers do? Adding costs for a PR campaign while the market is asking for meat at reduced prices? They join forces with FoodInsights. FoodInsights combines knowledge of database storytelling, optimizing food supply chains with profound experience in end-to-end supply chain data platforms. Together with FoodInsights, they build a transparency solution, including blockchain, along with providing database storytelling towards consumers. After implementation, Cowper's Poultry creates extra consumer trust with a QR code-triggered mobile consumer website as a new communication channel for direct communication with consumers, including track and trace information, product information, and engagement creation for their retail brand. Because all production data are aligned, they combine database storytelling with optimizing their production costs by reducing feed costs, further optimizing the energy cycle, and improving the results of their parent stock, while maintaining the health of the broiler flocks at a top level, proving the ability to get a grip on operational costs.
And where the topic of today is transparency, using that for database data-driven storytelling. We apply it, I just want to share with you also where we apply transparency in supply chains with our solutions. So we've been talking about data-driven storytelling for the consumer trust, as mentioned, but we also use it for quality, especially when there is a need for decentralized certificate management. Then you talk about the data of around quality, environment, and labor. And third is to share information in the operations scene, where you have to deal with various companies, various entities, various stakeholders. And build on top of that the possibility to optimize supply chains over these organizations. And second, to manage authorizations. And then I'm coming to the end of my story. So if you like to reach out, you can click on or you can scan the QR code, of course, or contact me directly.
Thank you, Wilbert.
And then we can go to the results of your questionnaire, Tiffany.
Yes. What do you think? What is your, in your experience, if you look at European or Dutch buyers, what do you think is the representing the majority of consumers to the question? Or
I think that plus 15% is having the highest frequency.
That's what you're
if you look to the four levels, you see that and a part of the population is prepared to pay a little bit more, and then 15%. Normally, you see 10 to 15% is the end result over the whole population.
Okay, so let's see.
I'm curious.
We have a small group of the representative of informed practitioners and consumers in the food sector, but still a big majority would say consumers should not need to pay for more information. 40% say so they were willing to pay for 0% of additional information. It's a little surprising or not? Still a big part with 15, yes.
Yeah, no, if you look at the people that are prepared to pay a little bit more, then that is the highest frequency. And of course, people like to get more value, preferably for the same price, which is normal human behavior.
Yes, but still also you see a very good percentage, 20%, they're willing to pay for whatever, that something they would trust, and which is, I would imagine, actually the focal audience for your storytelling, isn't it? Because in the end, you're not probably aiming for reaching to the mass consumer, but actually using storytelling to differentiate niche product.
No, that's not completely correct. If we look at our consumers, they sometimes say we just want to work on database storytelling and take the consumer with them on the trip through the supply chain. But in a lot of cases, we combine data-driven storytelling with also an optimization in the supply chain, and therefore we can reduce the costs So what we try to do is to make it a cost-neutral operation. So that means that the consumer is getting more value for the product, but yeah, then the cost can remain at a comparable level.
That's actually the question to you. It's through this complete integral approach. Do you actually believe that it's possible for products to find a differentiated market and not at actually the same price level, but offering more in the end? That should be in some ways, the consumer.
If we have the opportunity to have an integral approach, then normally that is possible, because there is a lot to optimize in the supply chain. Given the fact that you have more information, you can optimize on, and that is normally the problem. And so also the food companies, for example, if you look to the situation with retailers, if both are in the conversation, they both have an add-on, and then you can make things moving. The food companies, they like to have more turnover in the end, and the retailers, they like to provide products at a comparable price level. Information sharing is normally limited, so if you can increase that, and that is what is normally happening, that means that we have the possibility also to improve operations and reduce costs. But that all comes with having the right information available.
Right. So that's actually a number of questions already I can have, also drawing from the past talks, because in the past talks we talked about also the international long chain. So in your presentation, you mentioned people care most about the fresh product, which can be more easily changed to, let's say, regional sourcing. But then for coffee, chocolate, banana, these are very difficult to source. Tropical product, indeed, exactly. So this involves Latin America and Africa, and also the issue of getting the data, the right data, and having them shared and authenticated across a longer chain, all pose a lot of challenges. So I'm also curious to hear comments and questions from our audience, especially ones who also followed along our discussion, and to draw the different lines together. With that, I would like to introduce our second speaker, Stef. Stef Heutink. You're the creative director of IVRM Reputation. So that's reputation in English. So really, basically your company focused on building reputation by storytelling. Of course, storytelling is not new. That we do that as human beings since the beginning of ages, telling stories to entertain, to inform, to persuade, to build trust. So the question is, what do we have to learn new in this new world, let's say? And I'd like to ask you to tell us, how do we build a successful story that is embedded in the company's brand and DNA in our new future, in this new food world that's to come 2030?
Okay, let's make that effort. I'm going to share my screen. Well, that's from a movie you might all know, The Wolf of Wall Street. I certainly recommend to look at that one. It's a very nice movie. Why I just showed you that will be clear in the next 10 minutes. This is a masterclass about storytelling. It's also about the commercial opportunities. But first, let me introduce you our agency, because that makes clear how we look at the word reputation, and how we look into stories, into the construct of reputation. It's 2 minutes, by the way.
For the next 10 years, reputation value is key. It's about time. We all know that the world is changing. Technological advancement was the biggest game changer in the past 20 years. But we live with more and more people on the same planet, and people's needs are not diminishing. Attempts to address consumers in this world that they are responsible for the changes that these times demand do not change behavior. Matters such as flight shaming and less consuming are nice attempts, but also masquerades for where responsibility really should lie, with companies. Former CEO Paul Polman of Unilever said, "Companies that are only there to make a profit have no right to exist." He was a little early with this message, but he was right. New game changers are companies with larger goals and a greater sense of responsibility. That's what reputation is about. Not only the perception of customers and markets on your brand, but the perception of all stakeholders and the public. There is a direct link between reputation and the value you create. IVRM Reputation calls this reputation value. Brands with a high reputation value are preferred by investors, employees, customers, and markets. They are the public's favorite. Reputation is often seen as defensive. Someone with a large audience jokes about your new non-alcoholic beer, and there is a crisis. Specialists can solve these problems for you. So can we. But does it also increase the reputation value? Reputation is a makeable ecosystem. We direct this with the reputation mix. This foundation rests on 5 pillars: performance, leadership, relevance, working environment, and agility. Loading these pillars with the right marketing and communication means will increase your reputation value, and thus the goodwill on your balance sheet. IVRM is the ideas agency, the agency of the future that transcends silos, that shapes marketing and communication with reputation as leitmotif. Our customers have reputation control over their brand and organization. Our customers make the right decisions in the right direction, and together we create value. That this is more efficient and therefore also saves costs on marketing and communication has been taken into account. IVRM builds reputations.
Well, let's first start with some general remarks on storytelling in our view. First, let's look at the characteristics for a commercial story. What is the role of a story? It's quite simple, actually. It starts with something happens, and then it changed. And you are that something. Your brand is that something. And that's the role of your story in the complete story. Well, first of all, I want to start with some tips and tricks, just to make a good story. And then I will tell you something about how to construct a story. And then I will show you how it's done in the reputation value as I just showed you in the movie. First of all, stop thinking in target groups. So I always say think and act like a brand, which is actually a band. There's an audience, and you have to actually entertain the audience. The photo you see here, the picture you see here, is of course a very famous band. And if you see the tongue, their logo, everyone knows that's the Rolling Stones, almost 50 years, no, longer than 50 years, I believe. Then a story is not necessarily starting chronologically. Start always with something that attracts. I just showed you a small movie from the Sell Me the Pen, and that might attract you to look at the story further and to attend to the presentation. Well, this is something we learn from movies. Movies are seldom really chronologically, but always start with something exciting, and then it goes back and it goes forth, and that's also with books actually. So that makes sense. It's actually logic. And then Blaise and Pascal learned this. I'm writing you a long letter because I don't have time to write you a short one, and it's very difficult to make a short story. A very famous thing you could see on social media for several years, but it's also a nice invention, is try to tell your story in 6 words. And it will surprise you that it always will work. It's difficult because you have to really think about what do I want to tell. And if you can write it in 6 words or in a couple of words, it's a much powerful story to tell. Well, a very famous 6-word story is humans are mean, Earth's last words. Well, this actually tells a complete story, but it only needs 6 words. Then, very important, and Will would also talk a little bit about it, be genuine. Of course, stories are always, not always, but are often framed in this couple of words as an essence. I will elaborate a little bit on that in this presentation. You can use data to make a story, but use those data to really understand your audience. Really try to understand what do they need, what information do they need, and then be genuine about it. Don't use the data to, for instance, make your own frame stronger, because people in the end will see that. Well, then there's always a nice. It's already 13 years old, but it's a nice movie how not to do that.
Hey there. Long time no see. Looking good.
Yeah. Let's just keep this simple. I want a divorce.
What now?
I think you heard me just fine.
Come on. This is me. What's wrong?
We don't talk anymore.
I just put down $1 million on a TV commercial just to talk to you.
Exactly. You do all the talking. I never get a chance.
Talk on our website, can't you?
Sure. If I want to say, order this product.
See?
It's not exactly a dialogue.
What about the print campaign, You can't tell me you missed the billboard in Times Square. That was like a 200-foot tall declaration of love.
You're saying you love me, but you're not behaving like you love me. It's not genuine.
I don't know. The agency said I was genuinely being funny. Genuinely being charming. They said you would love everything I did.
Could you keep your voice down? You're not doing a radio commercial. Look, whether you're funny or not, it's just, I've changed. And you haven't. I mean, we don't even hang out in the same places anymore. You're not even listening, are you?
Coupons. You want coupons, don't you? Look, come by the store. I got 2 words for you. Loyalty, reduction. Am I right? That was it, wasn't it? Let's just hug.
If you knew me, you'd know I don't care about that.
Know you? Sweetheart, I know everything about you. You're 28 to 34. Your online interests include music, movies, and laser hair removal. You have a modest but dependable disposable income. Am I the only one not getting the problem here?
I'm out of here.
Oh, come on. Don't be like that. Look, I'll tell you what. Come back here tomorrow. I'll give you the chance to win a Bahamas vacation. There's a small chance, minuscule, but technically still a chance.
Well, that's from Microsoft about 13 years ago when the whole data intelligence, big data came up, and they really wanted to make a nice movie. And this is from a series of stories, by the way. You can find them all on YouTube. Building stories. How do we do that? Well, first of all, you really have to ask yourself, and of course your brand, your organization, what is your vision? Because that you need to have a vision to tell a story. Without a vision, that's going to be difficult. Second of all, make a strong foundation, and a foundation consists in, well, we use these words and we use these foundations from the branding strategy. Those are often the best storytellers, of course, and that starts with a category. And a category is something that sounds logic, but it makes sense. But a strong category is for your positioning of your brand or your organization. And if you can say this, really say this in 1 or 2 or 3 words, makes a very strong start to make a foundation for your story. Second, and that's a little bit about the 6-word story I just told, but then look at the essence of your brand, your organization. Can you explain the essence in a couple of words? Not preferably 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, but not more. Not a complete sentence, for instance. Then there's this foundation, and the example I found was Tony's Chocolonely. If you look at this brand, and well, chocolate, of course, you see it's a very famous brand, and they did it with not that many media pressure. They really they constructed a story, told the story everywhere they could. And how did they actually do that? They started with this foundation and said, okay, what's our category? And in the Netherlands, I can speak for that, they said, well, fair chocolate, that's our category. And it's of course very difficult, and you know that better than I do, but fair chocolate is almost impossible. But they claimed this category and said, we really want to thrive for fair chocolate. And that's what they explained everywhere. And in the Netherlands, they, based on this strategy, they claimed 17% market share and went over Nestlé last year, who is also 70%, but a lot of media buy and a lot of media pressure. And second of all, they came to the essence, pleasure for everyone. And you can see that in their tastings, in their how does it look, how does the product look, how does the product taste even, but also in the games they present presented on Facebook, for instance, or other platforms. Pleasure for everyone. And that's how they constructed this story and made 70% market share with this story. Well, if you really want to put it in a format, think in this format. That's going to help. What's the problem of the audience? Start with that. Your vision, of course, is what you know. That's the basis of the whole thing, and it's always sounding in your stories. First, start with the problem or the possible problem of your audience. That's the best start. Then think about what solution can I give, and that's what I started with. The solution is really what is the change I will make in this problem. This is the problem, and then this happened. That's your solution. Then tell how this process works. How does the solution work? Then make the promise. So don't start with the promise, but then make the promise. It can be better, it can be faster, it can be smarter, and then give the reasons to believe, and with the results. And if you look at your audience, also where I started with, we learned from the MBTI, which is Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It's a HR solution, but we use it also in our stories, because the motives of MBTI and the characterizations of people you want to reach are always in these 4 categories, and you have to take that in your construct as well. Some people are very red. They want to have the short bullets, the 5 bullets with the advantages, for instance. Then there's a group that's really sensible for images, for the emotion. Then there's an important group who, oh, I'm sorry, I see a small error in the sheet. In the blue, it should be information, so deep down information, background, data. That's very important for them. And the green group really wants to know, how do other people experience this? And it's never one of these 4. It's always a mix, but it's always a point where you can put your accents in if you really know the audience. Well, and then goes the reputation building to really combine it all. This is our reputation building. So we look at data, look at surveys, look at insights, really think about that, and do that periodically. So we look at our stakeholders and see them as an audience. Then the position you take, it's the category, preferably in 1, maybe 2 words. The brand essence, 2, maybe 3 words, but preferably not more. And then you can look where I started with the reputation mix. Where are we going to put the value on performance, leadership, relevance, working environment, and agility. And then we go to communication and behavior and actually telling our stories. Well, that's actually all I have to tell.
Thank you, Stef. I see you loves Leonardo DiCaprio. It's great. You remind me of another movie I also personally find very interesting. It's the Thank You for Smoking.
Oh, yeah.
It's a movie about the guy basically became the spokesperson for a notoriously bad sector, but he managed to turn every bad situation into a selling point. So the question is, when you talk about reputation, it's in some ways, do you work with, you know, the sectors that has a bad reputation, therefore they need to fix something? Or do you start with ones that already have good reputation? Like in the smoking industry, you can have a great story, but you know, it's inherently bad. It doesn't matter how good story you tell. It's a, so I think Simone asked a similar question. Story is not always good. Sometimes the story just to, in some ways, to mask certain, bad production, the characteristic of a product. So do you build reputation when there's something to cover, or do you start always something already has a good reputation?
Well, we want to look at reputation in an offensive way. We really want to build reputation. So, of course, a lot of our clients have a problem, and most of the time it's an issue, it's a crisis. We can help, anyone can help. There are a set of rules you use. Don't cover up. By the way, that's not the best thing to do. Be genuine, as I said in my story. Be honest, but stick to your story. Stick to your vision. But preferably, we want to really build a reputation on the reputation house building I just showed, and then really prevent crisis. Just make sure it doesn't happen. And if it happens,
okay. All right. In some ways, from the, I mean, of course, we don't know complete picture, but it looks like from Wilbert's presentation that Wilbert would focus on, let's say, the newcomers into the food sector that is doing good. The regional is using less resources, for example, less transport, and then try to build a story to get into new market. And on the other side, you have the, let's say, the big players that potentially actually have something to avoid crisis. So it's actually another spectrum of telling a story, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm not really sure if I understand the question, but if you looked at the poultry case from Wilbert, which is a very strong story, and I strongly believe that people really want to have quality poultry if they eat poultry. And what a crisis was is that's what it's typical Dutch, but it's the wakker dier, who of course brought to the surface how a chicken in the supermarket is produced. And they did a very successful campaign on that, and really moved the supermarkets, the supermarket brands, to move to better quality poultry. But I'm not sure if I understood the question right. But I don't know if you mean that. But...
If nothing to lose, meaning that if you have a sector that has a crisis to manage, have a reputation risk.
Yeah, but this reputation was definitely at risk, and that's for good. And now we really see the improvement. It's just slightly, but we see improvement in the poultry sector in the Netherlands. So that helps.
So that's actually that Dick has already a question on that. So Dick, would you like to ask the question directly?
Yeah, the very interesting case is that the Kloeke kip was called before Kuiperskip, and it is a fast-growing broiler. It is a plofkip. It's in fact the ultimate plofkip. But when you take the ultimate, so for our non-Dutch audience, it's a fast-growing broiler, but with a lot of welfare brought to it, because the young chicken is born in the same stable. So it has all kinds of advantages. And actually it is, it's not real yet, I think, but there Wilbert will correct me. But the chicken is going to be slaughtered in the same stable. And that is the most important thing in animal welfare, because catching chicken always bruises them, or even, well, it'll produce broken wings and legs, things like that. So actually, it's an enormous, really an enormous welfare. This type of husbandry is producing an enormous welfare advantage, but in a type of broiler we don't want anymore. And I asked Wilbert a question, can you convince, and that is your story, Stef, can you convince by opening up the facts, the audience, that it is in fact something that is good for nature, for biodiversity, etc., 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 while it is a plofkip, a fast-growing broiler. So they completely turned around. They are completely turning around the Wageningen story. That's the interesting case in this. So the floor to whom? To Wilbert or to you? Stef, what do you think that this can happen? What do you expect Wilbert is going to respond?
Sure.
Before I became into the reputation world, that's 4 years ago for me now, I was really an advertising guy. So I'm convinced that you can tell the public anything you want and you will, in the end, succeed. But
you can cheat.
Sure you can. But on the long term, I'm also sure that you have to tell the true story. So reputation is for the long term, and in campaigning, advertising, public always want to be told what to do. That's my strong belief.
Right, right.
Yeah, I will add a little bit to this one, not from the perspective of reputation management, but from the reality. I think that here we talk about the chickens with the highest level of well-being in Europe, because of all the advantage, the heavy investment in animal health, which is resulting in a high welfare, and therefore also an extreme low mortality. And it's not a secret that there's always a limited amount of animals that is not reaching the finish line, but that is here the lowest compared to actually every other system, and we have no transport in this.
Well, but what is the rate of mortality? Normally it's about 2%. That is the normal rate. How low is it here?
Yeah, normally it's about 3.1. Here it's 0 point something, 0.3, 0.5 maybe, but it's very, very low, and that heavy investment was made just to optimize the circumstances. So everything is done, literally everything is done to provide the best circumstances possible. So I think even in one of the articles on Foodlog a long time ago, I compared it to a couveuse, which is actually where they work on. It's actually a very big couveuse. But here the interesting part is that Wageningen came in. They've been very successful, as Stef mentioned, in campaigning. Investment was made just to provide for the most important reason behind the campaign. So now actually the situation is turned upside down, and it is interesting how to move further.
Wilbert, does your type of storytelling convince customers on the kloeke kip, I mean?
Yes, it does. But what I said in the chat also, here access to the public is an issue. So once you have access to the public, it is easy to convince the public. It's no problem at all. But you need to have access to the public, and the NGO we've been talking about is very effective in blocking access to the public. So once the access is there, you can move forward.
And how do they do that? How do they block access to me?
I think it's not the setting to elaborate on that.
Okay.
I see also questions already from Simona, which represent, let's say, the consumer, a big part of consumer trust issue, that you can provide data, you can provide that it is higher, but still, indeed, how do we know that what you say is true and in which criteria is like commonly accepted? Simona, would you like to switch on your microphone and explain your questions?
Sure, thank you for that. I hope the outside noise is not interfering too much. The point is, we are so influenced by NGOs about welfare of poultry, and especially about the fast-growing poultry, that I hear Wilbert saying it is the best in the whole Europe, but my question is, why should I believe that? And I suggest if you show me a movie from inside the stables, and we of course all remember the movies from inside poultry stables, where poultry is going through their legs, are growing too fast and are too heavy. Well, many have seen those movies, so I suggest, but I don't know whether that is a right move, to show movies from inside the stables, or at least have unpack a QR code where you can see a little movie about how it looks inside the stables or something like that. But I don't know whether this works. So I'm curious to hear from the experts whether this would be working and how to see my disbelief in what the poultry farmer is telling.
Can I?
Yes.
Yes. If you're interested, you're more than welcome. I think I can convince the owners of the stables. Showing with videos is also not a problem. We're doing a lot of research here. So a lot of the cameras are there already. So yeah, sorry, it can be provided.
Yeah, sorry, that's not my question. I'm not an average consumer, and I'm not angling for an invitation. It is about how to convince the general public that what you're saying, it's the best in Europe. How to convince them when they have seen all those movies about very chickens that are really suffering and so on. How can you convince the general consumer? It's not about me, it's about the general consumer.
I think the data are there, the content is there, but here we really come to the expertise of Stef. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that one.
Yeah, if I could answer that in 1 minute, then I would be out of business tomorrow. Of course, there's a lot. Then what I just said, I would look to the audience and really see what do they think is important. Who buys poultry? What do they think? What do they want from it? They want a cheap price, and with those data, and that's a survey. We're going to look at, first of all, the foundation. So we're going to look at what's the category, and probably there's a category to be claimed here. And then we're going to look at the essence, and then we construct a story on one of the pillars. So it's that. I can't say in general this works, that works. What we do know is that a very powerful thing is fear. Fear always works. So you can say something about health, but then I really would have to know all the data and look at the data and see what I can develop my message from. Can't say it in general. That's impossible.
But that's also in your presentation, Stef. You talk about, we just discussed issue of normally big corporations have a reputation, have the risk to manage. It's a reputation management. Also, they also have a potentially likelihood, a bigger PR budget to spend on having campaigns. But in the food sector, a lot of players are smaller, and they also, consumers ask for, not willing to pay for additional marketing or data traceability. So the challenges for the food sector is really, who is a gatekeeper? You can tell your stories. How do you know it's not just a cover up of something, you know, or just a way of twisting a certain truth? So if Wilbert says NGOs are blocking access to public, I mean, Simona is in some ways representing a voice, a gatekeeper for telling stories, telling facts to consumers on food safety, for example. When you have really good data that you believe it tells the whole story, why is it so difficult that it can be conveyed to the general public to know what is truth? So on that question, I see a lot of a response from our audience already. I'd like to maybe ask Lars de Keizer. Maybe you can switch on your camera and microphone, introduce yourself and explain your question.
Yes, my name is Lars. I work for ktba and also for Media in sustainability. The thing that triggers me most, I think, is in relation to the statement that you can basically sell anything, and you know, whether the message is bad or good, and how that relates to your authenticism. So I think that we've seen a lot of examples of companies that have historically not been behaving as well for our planet as they should have done. And as soon as they run into reputational risks, these risks have a tendency to really explode in their face. Whilst if you look at companies, the likes of Tony Chocolonely's, for example, when they were challenged on their slavery-free proposition, for example, in relation to cocoa, they were scrutinized by a number of critical NGOs because they said, you cannot make that promise. But because Tony Chocolonely's has an inherently good mission in terms of not harming our planet, they were able to respond and quickly kind of refute those arguments and said, well, we will do better. And they did, because they adapted and they amended their storytelling to say, we're on our way to slavery-free chocolate, as opposed to we produce slavery-free chocolate. So I think for me, that is, I think, a question that I would like to address to Stef, but also to Wilbert. How do you look at those sorts of companies and the way in which issues have a tendency to run away from you or explode? And the next question is in relation to an audience being blocked from certain information, especially in relation to sustainability topics such as human rights. There are often very important nuances to stories. So how do you know if your audience actually knows? That's a tricky one. How do you know if your audience knows what information they want? So that's my second question.
How do you know?
How do you know?
Audience wants.
Yeah, how do you know what your audience wants to see? If you talk about sustainability and take, for example, human rights, child labor, people, you know, if you ask any slightly cautious consumer what they think about these topics, they will say, that's very important. But if you then ask the follow-up question and say, what sort of information would you need in order to be more precise in picking a product or service that does not entail child labor or forced labor, then they're often silenced because they simply don't know the indicators for which they need to look.
The answer lies probably in the vision. I said in my presentation. Really ask yourself, what is my vision? And don't ask it once, ask it every day. Because if you don't have a vision, if Tony Chocolonely didn't have a vision, they would be bankrupt now. Because they made a promise that was on the long term, and everybody knew that on the long term, they couldn't make that promise. But they really try, and they want to be the best in there, and they can keep to that vision. They can stick to that vision.
Exactly. That's what I mean by companies being inherently authentic and inherently mission driven.
Yeah. And if your story is, I want to make money and I want to have chocolate and I want to bring it in the store, it looks nice, smells nice, it tastes good. With a campaign, I can sell it to the audience. That will work. But Tony Chocolonely took the long term, really took a risk and is a leader in this. Mm-hmm. They can have the reputation crisis they had last year. They can manage it. They will succeed there. Yeah. Because people will believe them.
Mm-hmm. But I think it also works in a similar way for companies that have kind of steered their inherent mission to become more sustainable. Look at Unilever, for example.
The Paul Polman.
Back in 2010, when they launched the Sustainable Living Plan, they said that certain commodity streams, and please don't give me a quiz on which these are, but some of these they made a 100% promise that those would be sourced sustainably by 2020.
Paul Polman lost his. There also was a question, I think, from Danone, and I don't know the exact case, but I think it's the same. Paul Polman lost an important stakeholder, is of course your shareholder. You can't deny that. And he lost them. He went 2 steps ahead instead of 1 step. And he forgot to take them with him. And he said, for instance, there will be palm-free soap. I think it's impossible at this stage. Mm-hmm. It's not going to. He's not going to succeed in that. So if your CEO is an important driver in becoming a sustainable company or a sustainable brand, mm-hmm. and he's going too far from the stakeholders, shareholders, that's also a problem. Yeah. Because then he won't succeed.
But still, I mean, in response to that, I think that upon launch of that sustainable living, the sustainable program from Unilever, I can't find the word. As soon as they launched that, there were already quite a bit of critical stakeholders that said, well, you're never going to attain this. You're never going to source 100% responsibly. But because they kind of reinvented their own mission and said, well, we at least want to try. As soon as when 2020 came along, there wasn't much scrutiny about the fact that Unilever as a whole did not attend a lot of these targets, but they made a good effort. And now they did it again by making the statement a couple of weeks ago saying every single supplier that we work with at Unilever is supposed to get a living wage payment. No way that they're going to attain that. But I, as a sustainability professional, I applaud them for doing, for taking that risk and being authentic, but also admitting to the fact that it is a journey and it is, there are sometimes a long ways off from actually reaching certain stuff. But if you don't make bold commitments, you will never get anywhere. So
that's why I admire Paul Polman.
Yeah,
because he made a big vision and he made his position, hoe zeg je dat, ondergeschikt.
Dependable.
To Unilever, and Unilever is really becoming the company he wanted to be. That's my admiration for him. Yeah.
Looks like for the future agro-food chains, it's wise, actually also a trend for companies, large or small, to assess actually in the beginning their reputation risk and take measures accordingly. Whether they then decide where they should best spend their budget, for example, on a bigger campaign or getting access to public or getting more improving on supply chain, for example. If you have a kind of an instrument or tools to actually help you measure this reputation risk and how do you manage them. It's you could say a coming science for companies in the food sector. And in that also, but problem is, and we also addressed this topic in the last talks, that there's a lot to do in developing standards. I think question from Anton from England about carbon trading, that whether people should pay for, let's say, if you say the fast growing chicken actually have less carbon footprint, but what does consumer really want and pay for? Anton, do you like to share your face and voice and then with your questions?
Yeah, I'm one of these people who studied in Wageningen how to make these chickens grow faster and faster about 20 years ago. And in those times, not no longer ago, we never even questioned the point. But the mood is changing. And even in the scientific world of livestock production, people become more conscious of what the consumer wants and how they want to do it. And you see a big move, for instance, in Africa, where they take out these broilers and come with a dual purpose chicken and say, now keep the hens for eggs and fatten the cockerels. And that is environmentally and socially a far better option than pushing this industrial model. For me, it's always very difficult to assess whether people are projecting their own unease with their own living conditions on these chickens. For me, I live in Kyrgyzstan. I'm looking on the Tian Shan mountains through my window. And I feel very sorry for people who are living in flats and in a country where you have about 300 people per square kilometer. And sometimes I feel that we have a very projection on animals, our own uncertainties and feelings put onto these animals. But of course, that's everybody would say you're from the wrong side of the coin. You're one of these people who torture animals. I think that farmers in Holland have also started to learn the lesson. You better open your stable and make a skybox and allow people to come in and tell your story. And the general impression is that nobody will criticize them the moment they see the love they have for these animals. And it's of course, it's not altruistic. I mean, they have to be good for those animals. Otherwise, these animals are not good to them. So there's a lot of movement to change these things. And especially the dairy sector is very scared to be pushed on the same side as the bio industry. So I'm quite hopeful that even within the sector, there is plenty movement to change. And people are prepared to listen to the consumer. So I think they are learning to tell the story and to work on their own reputation.
Yeah, I want to add something to it. I agree with Anton van Engelen, but we don't have to make the mistake that we have one consumer population with various groups of consumers, and our produce should cater for all these groups. So we should provide the possibility to choose. And if that is for dairy or for poultry, for salmon, for lettuce, they all have various challenges. But if you are able to tell the story of the products, you enable the consumers to choose for themselves. And in the end, I believe that they will be more satisfied. And in the end, yeah, with a reputation, you can manage, of course, a lot of things, but explaining them the story behind the product, how it works, and lay a foundation with the production data underneath it, in the end, will work out. But it should provide for different groups in the consumer population. There's not just one population.
No, look at the shelf for eggs in Holland. How many types of eggs do we have?
No.
Yeah.
But Wilbert, in your comment, you said that actually content is not a problem, but access to public. We could also say, actually, when you have a good story, like the Tony story, when you spend your investment onto building a solid foundation that is credit check-proof, people can check it, you can look into it, you can defend it. So actually, let's say in terms of investment of a company, you should better invest into building the business first before you talk about marketing. So the storytelling by itself should come in some ways is in the second place, because the challenge is actually to getting the right data, all the complete data, or getting the ones that can be authenticated, isn't it?
No, that goes hand in hand because we combine it. We need to have the data there. So we use it for the storytelling, data-driven storytelling, and we combine it also for optimization.
And understand the technicalities. I remember the Irish beef. At the time I was living in Ireland, it was the time that the Irish were using clenbuterol to push their calves a bit faster. It was called angel's dust. And they used Ralgro hormone implants in the ears. And in Holland, it was sold by Albert Heijn as the Green Valley beef from Ireland. And that was all correct and it was all legal, etc. But yeah, who knows all these practicalities? And that's another issue that the consumers are required to understand far more about the use of ivermectin in their cage-farmed salmon, etc., than in the past. And sometimes I have the feeling that the people are kind of looking back at what and seen and trying to get that undoubtedly pure natural product, which is rarer and rarer.
Yeah, but there I don't agree with you. If you look to the Ottensin type of product, we talk about the 40s and the 50s, and we talk about the generation of my parents. Then they didn't have a choice, and now we have a consumer population that has a higher education of, say, 45%. I don't know exactly the figures, but say about 50% has a higher education. And you see that a lot of these people, they want to be able to choose themselves and not that somebody else is choosing for them, but they like to choose themselves. So they need to have the information, and based on this information, they like to make a choice for themselves. And it's our challenge just to provide this information. Yeah, the challenge is there that you always have certain part of the supply chain. We talk about complex supply chains, if we like it or not, but that's the reality, where you need to have a lot of professional experience and knowledge to make the right judgments, like the ones you said about the Irish beef in 20 years ago, for example, and different other product groups. But I still think there is the challenge with just embracing your public, embracing your consumer population, and take them with you on the road to how you're doing it, and give them the possibility to make their own choices.
And
yeah,
the
and
question
hopefully also realistic choice. I always have to smile when the welfare chicken with 1 star, I think they live 5 days longer than the other ones.
Yeah, and if I show you the carbon footprint improvement that in this case the Kloek Kip is realizing compared to this 1 star broiler product, it's the size of a village or a little city for 1 year. That's the difference we're making.
Well, how many chickens do we slaughter in Holland a year? 50 million
less than
at
Brazil.
any time, does it?
No, yeah, I'd say 300 million roughly.
Yeah.
But that's Wilbert is that the consumer these days would like to make their own choices. So they want to know the information. They can choose whether I want to pay more for carbon footprint or for less pesticides.
Yes.
And then actually related question of Mustafa from Wageningen. He has no microphones and camera, but his question is, who should be responsible for checking the credibility? So meaning relating to the question of consumer making own choice, do you need still a, let's say, intermediary certification body of NGOs to be helping, let's say, further adding that credibility to claims? Or do you say, no, we actually don't need a third party to provide their verified truth, but then we just make sure we provide all the information and let consumers choose themselves?
Also here, you don't have one population. You have different groups in the population, and that is where you have to provide for. But yeah, in presentations, I have a slide that I didn't use today. It's 20 years ago and further. It was good enough to have good resources to contract the best professionals that were there in the field, and that should do. About 20 years ago, we realized that we need third-party organizations that do the judgment for us, and I think it created also really real improvements in that field. But because of the advancement of technology and the improvement of education of the consumers, there is a big part of the consumer population that is able to choose better and better for themselves, and that the need for the third-party verifier isn't that critical anymore. So with the new technologies, we can facilitate them to make the choices for themselves with a good foundation.
It's interesting because that was the topic we debated during our first talks with the discussion together with the Global Gap and on machine talking.
Yeah.
So the question is, how would that change the global standards? Would it be leading to a convergence of various labeling, for example, whereas because consumers don't need this 10, 20 of labeling to tell what is good, but then they just get to the source of data that is traceable.
Exactly.
And
yeah,
okay, so that's
exactly. And there, yeah, if you can work with the decentralized data standards where Global Gap is working with, for example, and that is, yeah, I think very interesting.
It'll be interesting to have a discussion, also bring back with our other speakers on the topic. How does this data machine talking, communicating on data, and then further translate into the storytelling onto also from small let's say the niche food producers to large food conglomerates. And that would be very interesting perspective. Look at how do they differ, or are they similar?
No, it's a different process. But how you end up at the level of the consumer, that might be similar, but the route to come there is different. This it's a very interesting topic because using the technology gives you the leverage of reaching a big public and informing them about a broad group of product groups.
And then also, I think it's interesting to I think Lars have some more comments. Would you like to explain by what you mean by global standard become much more context based?
Yeah, I actually just before I just switched roles. So it's just 2 weeks within ktba and Milieu nu. Before that, I worked for almost 5 years at Rainforest Alliance, one of the big standard setters, of course. And what you see happening is the standard setters are already anticipating on a move, because I agree with Wilbert there. As soon as more data comes in, and we be able to further substantiate that data with on the ground sample taking, etc., for example, then the role of the standard setter changes. But they will need to work more context based. In order to address specific issues that are pertinent in specific regions. So take, for example, certain human rights violations. For example, they take place in certain parts of the world. Child labor is very much specific to certain regions, around the equator. So what you need standard setters for in the future will be to assess the goings on and the practices on the ground, because if you use data to make stuff traceable, it doesn't necessarily, it only tells you that specific piece of food or produce originates from a certain area, which is very, very important for assurance purposes, but it gives you no information yet on the practices and the goings on the ground. And that's what certification and what standard setters are now hoping to change by becoming more context-based and addressing those issues that are really, really material, really pertinent for specific areas in the world. And then combining that with data to showcase that on the ground stuff is indeed changing, which is of course vital for storytelling purposes towards consumers, because that makes or breaks your story. So that's where my comment came from.
Great, thanks. A nice, interesting background also with Rainforest Alliance, because coffee and its tropical products, it's a very big, important food categories also for digital transformation, increasing transparency and fairness in global trade.
Most definitely, but coffee is one of those commodities that, or one of those products that is relatively, and I say that with the biggest caution ever, relatively easy in order in terms of traceability and transparency, because it's not necessarily a confectionery product. So take cocoa, for example, which is way more complex because it's often used in a confectionery supply chain. It's used for sweets, for cakes, for all kinds of stuff. And you know, currently with the current systems and the current technologies, we tend to lose traceability oftentimes. But luckily, there are new technologies like biotagging and blockchain that are developing to kind of close the gap, if you will. But if you ask me, we're quite a long ways from reaching that, but at least there is innovation that points out in that direction, and that's a good thing, I think. So.
I like to add a remark on that one. There also you see that technology is advancing, is what Lars is just mentioning, and in the cocoa chain, we're able to provide the traceability. It depends if people like to have it, but the reality is that the majority is still reluctant.
Yeah, true. And traceability, there's different levels to traceability. I mean, most of the issues take place in what we call the first mile of traceability. So actually, the smaller farmers, the smallholder that has a small acreage of land, grows its cocoa, you know, his cocoa or her cocoa or nuts or fruits or whatever, and then it gets collected at some point, and only after the collector passes it on to a big trader, the likes of Buddy Colabout, Cargill, that's where you most often see the first traceability information occurring, whilst most of the issues take place at that first mile. So that's why the blockchain is very important, but also the biotagging and DNA solutions are very important, you know, looking forward towards the future for assurance purposes.
I think it would be good to have Lars back on the panel later on this topic.
more than willing to help.
Great. So I think we have 5 minutes to conclude. I'd like to maybe ask Dick to also say a few words kind of concluding on the standard question as it pops up, also leading to our future talks about standard setters' role. Dick, would you like to?
Yeah, well, from the past 10 minutes, the last 10 minutes of this discussion, what comes up is indeed that standard setters are not the judges anymore, because in a way they are setting standards and they judge about goodness. And what pops up here is goodness is in the eye of the beholder, just as love is in the eye of the beholder. Goodness is a choice. So there will be various beliefs in various goodnesses. What comes up now is a very important question. Who assures data quality? Is there no deep fake in a movie from a stable? That is a new role for a standard setter. In a way, it is assuring raw data. How reliable are raw data? That is a question that is coming up. And indeed, standards aren't,
No, I don't agree, Dick.
Please, drop in.
If it would be easy to
fake
fake with the data, then you're right. But once you provide a full trace of the products, that means you put a lot of effort in it. And the reason that you put a lot of effort in it is that you're trying to prove that these data are right. What I think Lars de Keizer was just made a remark. If you're able to go upstream to the first mile, which is hard and takes a lot of effort compared to the value you're creating in the end, that means that probably you're authentic. And then the distrust isn't that hard anymore. So it's really a matter of technology, whereas what you were mentioning, Dick, faking the data is relevant when it is easy to provide the data. But once you've gone all those miles upstream, there's no reason to. There's only one reason, and that is to prove that you're authentic.
Yeah, and that is something you have to prove, and that is a question: how to prove that you're authentic, and that's what you do by your activity. The other question is, as came up from the discussion with Anton, what are the issues? Because consumers don't know. Now we know. Way back, we knew that it was a clenbuterol affair, but what are the issues? Carbon neutrality doesn't exist, yet we are selling it. And we know that it cannot exist because in the end, you're running out of space to plant trees. So carbon neutrality is fake as a concept. How to go about this? Who is setting issues? That is going to be a very important question as well. Is it the NGOs? Is it the others? Because you can't just invent, well, you can just sell anything like a pen, Stef, but indeed, how are we going to do the issue selling, and who is going to set the agenda? That is a new issue in this multi-valued, layered world, I think.
Thanks, Dick. So that's, I think that concludes our talk today. It left also questions for future talks. It's who are going to be deciding, first of all, the fundamental good and bad in a way, if there is. I thank you, everybody, for joining today. And I was hoping to ask Anton to show the mountain, but he left to talk to a village elder next time. So have a good day, everyone, and hope to see you again in 2 weeks.